Recently, I was playing a video game and I had one question that when I asked it, it kind of derailed my life for the better part of 3 weeks. I was playing Cyberpunk because I had just gotten a new PC and I turned all the graphics to max and I was sitting there in a mission looking at Jackie eating food. And next to me was this beautiful bao bun. I also low-key want to look at every single piece of food they serve in Night City and rank them. Like, this noodle looks pretty good, right? That's the question that ruined my life for weeks, man, and it makes no sense. It sounds silly, but before I get into why it's not silly at all, I need to make it clear I've never made a video essay, and I'm not even sure how to formulate one. I haven't been in school in 15 years, and I'm not a creative writer. So instead of like forcing you to watch my drawn out presentation, I just want to share with you the same path that I took while recording this video, and hopefully we end up at the same spot at the end. So let's get into food and video games. I started off by heading to a market where I knew there'd be a lot of vendors. I mean, one of the things Cyberpunk does well is it fills the city well. You have people waiting in line, you have people eating, you have this guy making stir fry with a pile of stir fry. And I found another vendor that had a lot of the food that Jackie was eating. We have the fish bowl with noodles, the stir fry in a bowl, the bao buns, which started this project, and then, you know, the high resolution 2D tofu in a bowl of soup. This looks great for what I assumed most food would look like in Cyberpunk. I mean, it is still 2D, but it's a high texture and there are some lumps in it to give it some visual distinction. From any distance at all, unless you're staring at it up close, this is passable as good food. We got another noodle dish guy, and then I saw a bunch of people eating over here only to see it's the same stuff, which makes sense, you know, like it's probably a market known for this kind of food. We have an Americanized grill that has a double cheeseburger, some fries, some other sandos. I'm not sure why this one's half eaten under the display case, but okay. This guy was super nice. He let me behind his shop, so I took a look. He's got stinky tofu, new food item, and these burgers with the buns grilling too. A little In-N-Out style, A+. I saw this stall in a different area and was kind of interesting because it's serving the same tofu and the same fish noodle dish, but it also has sushi. So this sushi probably in the running for the best looking food in the game. I mean, I'm not sure if they use photogrammetry to scan this in so it looks more realistic, but looks great. Virtually every restaurant has these kebabs and frog legs. All the food that you're looking at and all the food that I'm looking at, you can't buy any of that food. All of that is just for display. There's no actual transaction that you can make, even though there's a price tag on the sushi in front of you. I went over to the Arasaka Plaza where the rich corporations are, and I went to some of the higher class establishments with the idea being that, you know, they're gonna serve the rich people nicer food, right? And while it does look nicer in here, the guy's wearing a suit that you talk to get food. This guy's eating the same stir fry in a takeaway box that you see everyone eating in Night City. So then I'm like, all right, what's on the menu? We got grilled sausage, burgers, spicy pizza, some drinks. This guy walks up to me out of nowhere and there's sushi on the table.
What have you got that I can sink my teeth in?
Anything you like.
Food in Cyberpunk is solely used for small buffs like 5% max health regen over however many minutes 450 seconds is. So I've never actually looked at it or used it at all in my first or second playthrough. Food wasn't essential to the gameplay loop in Cyberpunk, at least not for me. Even on higher difficulties where you can benefit from health regen, anytime I was dying, I was thinking my gun's not upgraded properly, or I need to put more points into health, or I need to upgrade my cybernetic mods because those seem more logical than just eating food to get a temporary buff. I go next door to the hometown deli, still a nice place. It looks great, even more upscale than the place I was just at. I already noticed that the menu's the same. Like, it's the same menu as the place I was just in, even though they probably serve different stuff. I was wrong. They serve, I mean, literally, it's the same stuff, just reorganized. Why is a tamale in here? Like, it makes no sense. So I'm beginning to worry, like, okay, is there no food continuity in the game? I walk over to a brand new place, a whole different faction of people live here, and this is the food vendor. And this guy is selling, well, it's like a 7-Eleven, it's the same stuff. Even in the missions where food is present and you're sitting in diners, you never actually eat. In fact, the only time I think I remember somebody eating is when big old boy over here was munching down on a burger the whole time you're talking business. Sometimes food's just literally there on the side of the road, and all of the unique looking places like this noodle shop, you walk in and even though they're a noodle shop, there's no noodles. They're selling the same kebabs available everywhere, the same hot dog, the same fries and burger, And this guy's not even eating. Like, not just is he not eating, she's texting and eating fries at the same time. And there's a sandwich that's not available in any of the displays on the counter. There's some prominent vending machines you cannot use with food that I have not seen really outside of anywhere besides a menu, like the taco beef and this mystery bacon bean pizza, which, you know, even lower resolution texture than any of the other food because it's only on display behind this like glass in the machine that you cannot use. Every vendor like this you can't interact with, and they're doing the same thing, making the same 5 foods.
Aren't you a little young to run a business?
Someone in the family's got to be the scoff winner. I can count, and I've got good hands. All you need.
I was under the impression there weren't kids in Cyberpunk and they were just little adults, but that is a child, and this child is a chef. This chef is the only one I've seen using the mystery taco meat and low-res meat from the vending machine, and in the back he's cooking some diabolical skewers up. Look at these things. I mean, that's really high-res, gotta be scanned in. Look at the juice. It's kind of unnerving. And then you have this like mashed potato and gravy thing. I had one more place to go just to make sure all of the food in this game is the same no matter where you go. I went out into the boonies. This guy is, as far as I know, the furthest away place from the city you can buy food. They're just standing, getting drunk in the middle of the desert. All of the food's the same. It's all the same. And they're eating hot dogs. I mean, the guy is grilling noodles and she's eating a dog. And he's got a burger. Where'd you get that from? Who knows? I don't know. Every single food service point in the game just operates like a 7-Eleven, like a Quick Mart. They all serve packaged foods or some variety of canned and packaged foods with some random fresh food that doesn't fit wherever they are, like dumplings or tamales, and that's it. Like, that is it. It's shallow. It's not only the role that food plays, but the role the AI play in food, because they all walk up to the counter and stand there. They don't order food. No food is passed between people. Nobody sits down. This nice guy lets me back here. He's eating a burger on duty. This guy's ripping cigs in the kitchen and he's making tofu. I mean, there's literally no continuity between anything being served, being eaten. The AI will literally eat at the order window in some sort of weird power move to try and, I don't know, assert dominance against the guy who's selling food. After I had gone through the whole world of Cyberpunk and understood that food was very, very limited, I started making excuses for the game like, oh, they don't have a lot of variety of food because a mega corporation owns all of it and they produce only a certain type and then they ship it out. And I was like, that's kind of sounds like a cop-out because there's so much detail in the rest of the world, but the food feels shallow. And I kind of was just annoyed. Like, I was expecting incredible food. I wanted to rank the food. There's not actually food. So my question became, what game has good food? Hold up, I know that you were expecting Monster Hunter or Final Fantasy, and that will come later. I'm just taking you through the weird path my brain took because I was thinking, what game have I played a lot of that has a ton of food, a lot of animations, and you need food to live? And so, Tarkov. If you've never played Tarkov before, it's a hardcore extraction shooter based in Russia. You load into a map, you loot things, you get out. And you need to eat and drink in order to cure yourself of status effects. You might get dehydrated from running a lot or low energy. So I decided to go on a big map with tons of food available, streets. I load into a coffee shop and immediately get shot at, which is crazy, but that's the risk of trying to film some food. Their menu's all in Russian, but the display shelves look like fresh food and bread, which is cool. There's a popcorn maker on the table, and there's not actually any fresh food in Tarkov because it's a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Am I making excuses? You open up your food in first person and you take food out and you eat it. And it does sound kind of gross depending on what you're eating. This MRE is crackers, apparently. This box of oat flakes is comical because you open it up and put about 5 in your hand and you're like, that's enough for me, thank you. I got attacked while running to the grocery store in hopes of finding some actual fresher food, but then I murdered him and I found sprats in his pocket, which is just like fish, and this is a unique animation. You pull a little fishy out, you eat it. The can itself doesn't change, but I think it's cool that you actually eat the fish. The rest of the grocery store is about what you'd expect. There is some produce, most of it just 2D or very simple textures, and all of it rotting, which is a nice touch. I've always thought they have some of the best environmental artists at Tarkov. All of the spaces feel as realistic as you'd kind of expect them to, whether it's in a city or outside. But one of the places they do struggle in this game is realism and copyright infringement. I mean, you reload bullets one at a time into your mag, and you actually have to take a realistic, I'm gonna quote, realistic amount of time to drink things, which puts you in danger. And the food itself is realistically disgusting when it comes from a can as well. It's pretty much mandatory for you to bring food along into a raid, unless you're gonna go find it scattered around the world, which is totally plausible, but many times, whether getting injured or taking too many painkillers or running too far, I'm dehydrated, and I am scavenging for a juice box or some milk. And the feeling of finding that is like, it's like finding water in a desert. It's a great feeling in the game. One place Tarkov doesn't do as well with food is in telling a story, the continuity of the food presented to you. So on Interchange, there is a sushi shop in the food court upstairs that does not have fish, no lootable fish or sori or herring or anything. The same props from the cafe and no indication they would serve sushi, no chopsticks, no soy sauce. And the only food that you can loot is like a glowing bag of rye croutons, obviously randomly placed there by the game. And it's at this point that I'm like, uh-oh, I don't think I can accurately judge food in every game and ignore the role food plays in the lore. Like, of course, in this totally not Papa John's, they have plenty of pizza boxes. There's some continuity, but the trash itself is the same trash in other places. And as a player, you need to know, like, I can't pick up this box, but I can pick up this juice box, or I can pick up these croutons. So the food is in where you'd expect it to be, just not the right food. Like, why is there salami in a juice box inside the Papa John's with a milk box? I don't know. Continuity matters to me because it's one of the few things that takes me out of an environment or out of a game, and I'm like, why did that? Why is that not where it should be? For the same reason why it might annoy some of you that I forgot to wash my white shirt that I wore for the first half of the video, so now I'm wearing a black one. I made my friend Gold Glove drop me a bunch of food that I liked the animations for, including this final one for Super Water that is so long that this is it sped up twice as fast as normal. I mean, they make you stand here. Yes, you can cancel the animation, but it's just like, out of all the things they make you have a realistic amount of time drinking, they make you drink the whole jug. Another game that I've played where food is prominently featured is Sons of the Forest, where it has you in survival mode eating everything from raw meat to cooked human legs, and that is a little bit gross. The devs did a good job with making this gross because it pushes the player, me and my friends, to try and find alternative foods than the raw fish that we catch or a human leg. And those animations, when you cook the food, are significantly less gross, and they give you more health, and they don't make you sick. So they're trying to encourage the player to use some of the in-game mechanics in a more beneficial way by making it gross to do the easiest thing possible. Which is not to say the food in this game is good. I actually hate it. They have great animations and they use it well to push the player to do things, but they have you eating 40 times a day, and you're waking up thirsty and hungry and starving, and you're always looking to cook up things, and they made it annoying. So this game, not good food on that purpose alone. The way my brain works is that I'm thinking Sons of the Forest is a realistic survival game. You need to eat a lot to survive. What is an unrealistic survival game that you eat a lot to survive? Ladies and gentlemen, Minecraft. As far as gameplay goes, this is the most full experience of food that I could imagine and think of that I've played. So you've got raw food, you've got cooked food, both have different benefits. They change. Some food's better at filling you up than others. Exploring different biomes of the world gives you access to different food, and then combining that food will give you the ability to survive longer. It's got farming where you plant seeds and you use those seeds to grow crop, and then you use the crop to feed animals, which grow the animals that you then kill and then you eat them. I mean, that's literally the circle of life right there. Considering the fact you eat so much, they did a good job making this not annoying. Like, the sound of eating and drinking in Minecraft is just there, and the food textures aren't gross or good looking, they just are. Anytime I play Minecraft, I would run mods on it to make it look better, but one thing I never thought to do was run a 4K high resolution texture mod for food, and it made me realize that that would look really weird. I mean, most if not all video games are limited in how they present food to us by the art style of the game itself. Otherwise, that's gonna look odd. I've been playing RuneScape on and off since I was like 12, and even then, I didn't really grasp how well they put food into the game. Obviously, we're starting with the cooking skill because underneath this tab, there are so many different types of foods that you can make from leveling up your cooking. Not all foods do the same thing, but largely they will just give you some buff, like maybe more strength, but they will heal you, and that is important because if you are doing anything remotely active in RuneScape, you are probably in a position to take damage, therefore you need to heal often and frequently. The animation is short considering how much you're eating during battle. It all fits in pretty well to the gameplay. I forgot I canceled my membership, so I can't use my teleport tabs to get into Varrock, so here I am upset at how fast my stamina drains while carrying 25 swordfish in my backpack. None of this is realistic, and none of it should be, but they did take care to try and make the world feel realistic, as in there are ranges to cook food inside most of the houses where NPCs should live. There are bars scattered around that have NPCs in them. Farms are being tended by farmers, and when you click on them, it says farming. The crops are swaying in the wind. I mean, there's kitchens with chefs in them, even if they're NPCs. They're there doing whatever they're supposed to do, and the people in the bar are drunk. Nobody uses the real life gathering places because you don't need to. Like, you don't need to actually be in the bar at any point in time unless you're doing a quest, and you don't need to actually be in the kitchen to make food because you can just light a fire anywhere. So RuneScape does a good job of setting the scene, putting food where you'd expect it to be, putting people in those environments, ultimately food gathering areas and using food as a gathering place, not necessary in RuneScape. You're gonna mostly find players hanging around areas where you train skills or barter for trades, like the Grand Exchange or the salmon spot near Barbarian Village. No, the food isn't good looking, but same deal as Minecraft. You don't need to change the art style to make the food effective in the world, and the diversity of choices that you have is impressive. But again, this is an MMORPG with a skill devoted to cooking. There better be a lot of ways that you can cook food. But overall, RuneScape put food into the environment and the game incredibly well, and it's a sleeper pick for one of my overall favorites. What is the most useless food possible in a video game? A food that is not needed at all. In fact, it probably hurts the game to be in there. Counter-Strike. In Inferno T-Spawn, you run past these bell peppers all the time, and they can be interacted with. There's also a fruit vendor outside. All of the food that you can knife or shoot explodes into small pieces. There's textures inside, except for the lemon. The lemon texture is broken. I don't know if that's on purpose. And if you Molotov a chicken, the chicken turns into a rotisserie chicken with a little sprig of thyme on top, which is tasty. Now, oddly enough, these bananas up in the apartments don't break apart. In the map Assault, there's a very nice kitchen that just has a banana and a cucumber sitting on top of it, but also a bakery. And in this bakery is something interesting. Very weirdly enough, some super high resolution bread for the video game, right? Like, it's behind a window. It's also hidden away. There's no food anywhere else on display in this map, but these bread look good. The most food I found on any competitive map is the market in Italy, where I think they have almost every single food, texture, or object from source in here. They also have fish, which look pretty good as well, a nice bakery, but here in the pizzeria lies the only pizza in Counter-Strike on the map. Just this one. It's a nice 2D texture. That's it. I don't know what to say, but it's definitely not important. So I joined FM Pone's Discord, he's the maker of Cash, in order to ask some aspiring map makers about food. When I asked about food, they did not get why I was asking about it, but eventually I got the response that no, it's not a huge performance issue if you put a lot of food in maps. Most likely map makers just don't see it as essential to include food props in their Counter-Strike, which is crazy because you can literally shoot out the individual computer parts in Office, but you can't put more effort into food props? I mean, why would you? When the person who answered my question about food then questions if there's really food in the game. My good friend Flom is a professional Counter-Strike player with 9,000 hours in the game, and when I asked him what his favorite food was, this was his reply. What is your favorite food in Counter-Strike?
There's no what?
How many hours do you have in Counter-Strike? And you don't you can't
food. I've never seen food in Counter-Strike.
Fizz objects. Trust me, I have Source Filmmaker. I've seen them all.
When I asked FM Pone directly about food, he didn't gaslight me. He actually gave me a pretty easy to understand answer that food just plays a role in the environment and setting a scene. So you're not going to put food in a bathroom unless you wanted to gross people out. And a lot of Counter-Strike happens in streets and in nuclear reactors, in places where food wouldn't commonly be anyways. If Counter-Strike's a good example of a game that uses food correctly where you'd expect it to build setting, and even then players don't really pay attention to it, well, what is the game that has the best setting, the most realistic setting possible, and how do they use food? Oh baby, it's Call of Duty time, and we're going to start off with the most realistic mission in the first Modern Warfare, where you clear out a townhouse full of suspected terrorists. Now this mission blew my mind when I played it. The photorealism, the textures, the scale of the home, the scale of the hallways, the lack of any food in the kitchen. No, seriously, the only food in the kitchen is this singular apple. I mean, we have a fully textured microwave with buttons you can read, with a knife block, with a kitchen, and there's no food in the whole house. I mean, there's 25 people in here. Technically, there is baby formula if you want to nitpick, but the rest of the house is devoid of food. This is a game where you literally shoot the light bulbs out to lower the light in the room with your night vision goggles, but they can't even give you some food? I have played every single Call of Duty campaign many times. I just don't have the save file on this, which means I gotta play through some of the first missions, and it might give me a good idea as to how they're gonna use food, not just in the hyper-realistic Amsterdam mission, but for the rest of the game. First mission of Modern Warfare 2, and I'm storming this house, eager to see the food. The game kills me because I get too far away from my mission. So I get back into the house, and the only food in this entire outpost is an Americanized bag of potatoes and a singular styrofoam takeaway tray, which whoever's delivering food to a war zone, shout out to you. But they have like high-res photos for a video game, and then just this water bottle that says water on it. I don't expect there to be tons of food in the drug-laden houseboat, but there is some more food in this mission right before the Amsterdam one that actually is interactive. You can shoot this 6-pack of beer and the cans kind of explode. I thought that was a nice touch, considering there's not really any other food besides these bags of chips and the big gulp that explodes and nothing comes out. You're meeting Captain Price at a busy public cafe on the cobbled streets of Amsterdam. Look at how good the goddamn streets look, man. This is the perfect time for the game to show us how they use food to help us set up the most hyper-realistic environment that I have ever played in any video game. I started looking at all of the shops that they have around. I started looking in the shop windows, noticing there's nobody in there. And then when you get even closer, there's actually nothing in there, like not even a 2D image of food. And I get closer to where Captain Price is, and I see all these people near a cafe that definitely serves food. And guys, none inside the cafes, no food on the tables, none in the restaurants. Actually, there's literally no food that I can find in any part of this hyper-realistic mission except for this one lady who is eating a bag of chips with nothing in it. And not only that, she don't even have an eating animation. They just made her use an empty voice line to mimic chewing. Guys, are you kidding me? Since I started this video, I always, in the back of my head, was like, no matter what, I still got the Call of Duty mission to go check out, so I'm looking forward to that. And apparently, I was gaslighting myself. I've played this mission several times. I know what takes place here. I never noticed there was no food in the whole mission. Like, food doesn't matter, huh? Like, I'll just fill in the blanks. Food doesn't matter. I'm tilting because I actually thought I was going to come up with some brilliant point at the end of this video. Like, of course food matters in the realistic event. What does food matter? Man, now I got to go check out other big budget games that I know have food. So welcome to Magic Land. And the Great Hall is, of course, always filled with food. And it's a pretty good spread at first glance, albeit a bit weird. Not even getting to the end of the table, and it's clear this is all just one big set piece. I mean, people are not eating in front of their plates. This witch is generating food from nothing. I only spent about 2 minutes in the Great Hall because that's all I needed. I mean, this is about as 2D of food you can possibly have in a video game. It's just here to be here. It's the bare minimum. I'm convinced that if they did not have the Great Hall, they would not have food in the game. They would just not have eating. I'm convinced that if they could get away with just deleting the Great Hall, there wouldn't even be food props available in this castle. Outside of Hogwarts, there's actually a surprisingly graphic meat shop that wouldn't look that weird in Red Dead Redemption 2. The 3 broomsticks, Hogsmeade, all of them serve the exact same single meal, of which it looks like bacon, sausage, corn on the cob, a potato, slop, and an artistic sauce swirl. There is food in the garden, big pumpkins, these things, some hot peppers, and they applied the wavy wind filter to the strawberries. I don't think they grow in winter either, but it's Harry Potter. They can do whatever they want. Scattered around the world are these small interactive things like, hey, go drink this shopkeeper's drink he has sitting in front of the meat, or go eat this random person's bowl of nuts. It's a pretty basic attempt to make you feel immersed in the world because you can interact with it, but since there's only like 4 different prompts in the entire area, it feels like you do the same thing over and over again to annoy people. The most immersive food is actually in the candy shop because they use food as a mechanism to kind of show off the fun and quirky little magic gimmicks that happen when you eat the food, the candy itself. The weird thing is that the most animation they do is for the cake, where you take a bite of the cake and then nothing happens. Again, since they're using food in this way to show off some of the cool and quirky things that everybody read about in the book or everybody saw with their own 2 eyes at the movie theater, like you eat this candy, something's gonna happen. Without having to use food as a mechanism for that, I doubt there'd be food in this game. Star Wars Outlaws is a bit better. I didn't play a lot of this game, and candidly, the only Star Wars I have ever watched from the original series was The Phantom Menace when it came out on VHS, so please forgive me, but I always did appreciate how Star Wars took their environments and their design to the next level. It has always been incredible. Unless I missed something, this is the only time you actually eat in the game, and it kind of sucks because it's like being beaten over the head by the game dev for saying, like, you know that people use food to get closer together, right? Like, you want to be closer with Nix? Go share a meal with them, and then sit down and do the most garbage, unnecessary QuickTime event I've ever done. I mean, it is incredible. They thought that this would somehow bring me closer and make me more immersed and engaged in the moment than just giving me a Monster Hunter or a Final Fantasy dish presentation. I have the same issues with Outlaws as I do the other games that at first glance look really good environmentally. The limited vendors in every place sell kind of the same stuff, and there's nobody actually engaging with the vendors in a meaningful way, but the food modeling itself looks pretty good, and I do have to give props for the stages of food I'm seeing in prep. You've got the spices, and then you've got curry, you've got this raw frog thing, and then you got the frog thing ready to get the branzino treatment. After seeing this, it made me realize they use shawarma spits in this as well, and I'm like, well, maybe the cooking method is what makes the product look a little bit more appetizing, even though it's not from this earth. It's that time of the video essay. I am legally required to bring in an expert to talk to you guys, and I could not think of somebody better to talk to than Andy Lunique, a good friend of mine who is a chef. He's managed restaurants, he's run restaurants, he started his own, he's written cookbooks about food in games. There's nobody else that I could probably bring in that would know more about this. So Andy, what is it about food that is so hard to model it correctly?
If you consider food to be always evolving, always changing, this is the kind of understanding that if you're making an egg, the nature, the texture, and the colors on that egg are very simple, right? You've got a very, very sharp white and a very subtle and then sometimes deeper yellow. The moment you get into something like a stew, which is changing textures and has different bumps on it, and then of course the color is changing based on the shadow, then the contrast of the bowl, the heat is diffusing the colors, the complexity of food in real life is very hard to translate. When you see a cup on a saucer, you know tea or coffee, universal. Everybody knows what that is. The moment you look at a soup where there's a bowl, food inside of it, and sizzle marks at the top, everyone around the world can go, that is soup. So that is why you see a lot of simplicity, depending on how it's likely used to convey an understanding to the player. But when you're talking Final Fantasy and all these other games that have incredible food, Monster Hunter being one of them, the very nature of the food is changing, right? Like you're literally seeing metamorphosis. So you're asking a game that usually has what I'm going to call definite units or standard units, non-changing units. Like a sword will not change, but like a bowl of soup will. And that's probably why it's so difficult.
Do you think that we have to enter the uncanny valley to get food that you consider to be traditionally tasty looking?
I am completely against the nature of ensuring that it needs to be realistic, to be beautiful or appetizing. It's easy to completely default to Studio Ghibli to show you, no,
Right.
food doesn't actually look like this, but my God, that looks good. Right? Like they don't miss. Yeah, it's incredible. And even some very simple recipes, even out of the Pokemon universe, there's sandwiches, there's curry, there's those fun little rice balls, the nori balls that folks see. I believe that the human mind can fill in the blanks and understand that what has been presented to me is incredibly attractive. It reminds me of the real thing. It does keep me excited and does get me appetized without having to feel like I need to see the real piece. A piece of pizza animated with dripping cheese and pepperoni still gets you hungry,
Right.
right? And that's why I don't think you need to cross the uncanny valley at all.
You mentioned Pokemon, which is, to me, one of the most insane food things in any video games that I've looked at. And here's why. An incredibly extensive mini game of item collecting, food collecting, different regions and grocery stores sell different meats and products and toppings, to which they ask you to start a picnic, get your Pokemon together, and then craft a sandwich which will give you a buff like many other video games do. But you're doing all this while placing and plating the sandwich, and you get negative scores if the sandwich falls apart. Why did they spend so much time on food in this when it is such an incomprehensibly small portion of the game for the people that traditionally play Pokemon?
There's an aspect of what we're going to call game development that is spell crafting, making sure consumable items are worthwhile. And if you look at telemetry data, over the years, you've played lots of RPGs, you've played other games before where you have these particular items that no one uses because it's like, HP +1 or special +2, and there's no real connection to these magic potions or these special bandages or whatever that make you utilize the item. Developers have started incorporating food mostly because it's far more relatable than the fantasy items that they create. You need to make the advantages of that particular experience more fun. So if you make the mini game, making sandwiches and curry and collecting ingredients, far more entertaining, that becomes more valuable to the player, and thus you might do some other end game activities or other things that you normally wouldn't do. Food, as I've mentioned before, and I'll say it again, is just so universal. You will understand the nature of making a sandwich. You will understand your Pokemon enjoying it, and that very cute animation that happens when you get it just right is just endorphin boosting.
Right.
So that's why they go that route.
So what in your head is the ideal food item in a video game? Removing any biases or whatever, just like when you think of the best food, what is it?
It is a tie between, no, it really isn't a tie. I actually love Final Fantasy 15 the most. That is the best food representation. And I say that because not only is it a core aspect of the experience of camping, and Ignis with his signature line, "I've come up with a new recipe."
I've come up with a new recipe.
They tied the cooking to the narrative in such an emotionally impactful way that if you're not paying attention, you miss it. And it actually has such an emotional weight to that moment. I won't spoil it for you. You're going to know it when you see it because it's towards the end of the game. And the way they drop that in the game shows me that the food was not just an important aspect of the game and the mechanics, but the food was important to the characters.
I really don't think food matters at all in any video game whatsoever unless they specifically choose to put it in a mechanic that you would experience it in real life. Would you agree, or do you think I'm missing the point?
I disagree.
Okay.
Okay, and actually, I do need to commend you on calling out CD Projekt Red on their interpretation of food. And it's not because I expect them to have every single detail. It's just that they have so much detail everywhere else.
The man behind the curtain. No, that's what's blowing my mind.
Like, what is going on?
I never noticed. We're talking about the most hyper-realistic thing. And that really kind of broke me. I was like, did it matter? Does it matter? Doesn't matter.
Environmental storytelling isn't being done well. One recent example, recent-ish, where I feel like, hey, you guys didn't even need to do any of this, but you did anyway, was actually in Gears of War 4. Okay, it was Gears 4 or 5. I think it was one of the Gears games. Okay, there is a hotel that they're going through. Okay, the entire place is recently abandoned. If you go through the dining room and the kitchen, The food that's in the kitchen, the things that are on the shelves, is the same food that you see cooking on the grill, right? There's context to it.
Wow.
And then the food that's on the plate, it's scattered and it's broken, the kitchen's destroyed, is all there. And if you go to the dining room, the correct plates are being served in the dining room.
Wow, the continuity is incredible.
Right, I had no reason to pay attention to this, and I shouted those folks on Twitter. I go, I don't know who spent like 6 months on this, but thank you. Like that was for me.
Yeah.
But I sat there and go, you had no reason to do that, but you did because you understand there was a fine dining banquet. There was a big to-do. There were chefs here. There are dead guests here. There's a whole event. Why were all these people here? Now there's a story. Right. And that's where food, where it's not a mechanic, is best incorporated. And I think that's something I hope more devs think about. There's weight in that scene now. That's my thought. And yeah, that's why I was like, agreed 90% up until that point.
My final question. So there's this game called Arctic Eggs. It's an artistic game.
Oh my God, I never thought anyone would mention that. Oh, I love you. I love you. Oh my God. Okay.
I need to know, can you fry an egg on top of Mount Everest, logistically speaking?
Yes, you can. The problem is you need a heat source that's hot enough.
Right. That's it.
That's it. That's
it.
It's at that point, it's not a cooking question, it's a physics question.
This game is not normal. It's also one of my favorite out-of-the-box games I've played where you cook whatever dish the hungry people want with a really slippery nonstick pan and awkward controls. I mean, this food doesn't look good, right? The eggs look okay, given the art style, but the beer and the tin of sardines is not ever going to be appetizing. This made me realize there's probably another game I've played a lot of that has unappetizing food, and I logged on to Elden Ring, which kind of surprised me. There's not a ton of food in this game. I mean, there's pickled feet and rotting flesh and whatever, but I wanted to find real food. I decided to visit all of the places where I thought there'd be human-like beings that may have had dinners. And outside Limgrave, no food. I mean, I killed all these people. No food, no suggestion of food. Anywhere that you would expect there to be food, like in this area where you get a cookbook from a cook laying on the ground, there's no food. There's castles everywhere, both in the main game and in the DLC, and some of them have table setups, which is cool, but only this one that I found had fruit and, I guess, bread, which leaves a little bit to be desired. So I went to the wiki because I'm like, there's food somewhere. There's big lobsters in the game and whatnot. And it turns out I missed an entire grace in the middle of the map through my playthrough. And this guy's been boiling lobster and prawns the whole time. I mean, it actually looks good.
Oh, I see. You want some of me prawn?
That's not the only real food in the game. The Hornset Grandma has a bunch of just various potatoes and dried spices laying around, which they look pretty good. This is the most realistic kitchen that we've got, even though they've got limited ingredients. And if you complete a quest in the DLC while wearing the dancing lion helmet, talk to her, and she will give you a delicious bowl of scorpion stew, which looks I'm going through this video and I keep saying I don't want to talk about lore-based food, but like the most famous eater in the entire Elden Ring game is the loathsome dung eater. This guy just eats poo and curses families. It's gross, but I mean, technically food. Yeah, this might be obvious to some people, but after thinking on it, this might be my choice for the best food in a video game because of everything we talked about in every other game prior to this. It's all kind of put together in a meaningful way. You've got the exploration for different types of materials component that a lot of video games have. You also have the ability to kill animals with specific weapons, some of which are not appropriate and will damage the meat. So you have to be attentive to that. You can sell your meats and sell the animal parts to make money and income. That's great. The food transforms when you're cooking it from raw to medium well to well done. There's unique animations for eating in first person. The food being served at these cafes is period correct. All of these are really great attention to detail. There are some caveats, like you don't actually eat the food in single player in the cafes or the restaurants. They put it down, you take it away, you put it back empty. They put high resolution textures on the butcher shop meat, even though sometimes there's no meat on the butcher table. They've got the standard cheese and potatoes and rotten fruit sitting outside the closed shops. So, I mean, they did a really good job, but it's Red Dead Redemption, you know? The food textures are good, but they're not as good as Monster Hunter, and the dishes are real, but so are a lot of Final Fantasies, and those look better. The first-person animation eating isn't as good as Sons of the Forest, but when I walked into Saint Denis and I witnessed a miracle, I knew Red Dead was my choice.
Gentlemen, you're embarrassing.
Oh! Oh! Oh my God! Oh!
I'll give you one guess where they're
Oh my gosh, he's scooping the peas!
Yeah, okay.
Oh my God! Nah, you can't even begin to understand how happy this made me feel. When you reset the room by leaving the area or setting the building on fire and killing everybody, the NPCs come back and there's a full plate waiting for them to dig into. And not only that, but there's like third-person swallowing animations when you take shots and drink. Like not just chewing, which there is chewing animation, there's swallowing animation. Who does that? There were also like 3 or 4 food-related things that I wanted to share with you as well that I didn't find a place for in this video. Probably the worst looking high-resolution food I've seen is in the Resident Evil 2 remake with this burger. They photogrammetry scanned it in and it looks abysmal. In 2010, Battlefield Hardline had a super high-res burger that became a bit of a meme, and I went back to find that photo, and only now am I realizing that this burger is sitting next to 2 packs of condoms in a school. Hades is an incredible game that takes place in the literal underworld, and yet they still reference, well, a gyro and fries. I mean, yes, Greek mythology and gyros being Mediterranean, that makes sense. I just thought it was funny that they only talk about eating and drinking nectar, and here we have food. My very first experience with any food product in a video game came when my dad brought home a video game from his job. He used to sell diabetic testing systems, and he brought back a game called Packy and Marlin, a game where you play as an elephant with diabetes that shoots peanuts out of your trunk at rats because the rats have stolen your insulin, and you will die without that. There is so much more that I could keep talking about that I didn't even get to cover, like how horror games use food to make you uncomfortable, how cutting a cake weird will make you feel weird, or how using the monotony of creating food will desensitize you enough to get scared at a jump scare. I didn't get the chance to talk about every one of the janky food-related sim games that populate Steam that I've played, and I could make an entire video about those as well. So what's my takeaway from all this? I didn't set out to prove anything, but I feel more comfortable about how I view food in video games. Food, when thoughtfully put into a game, can really elevate the experience for the player, but this is actually pretty difficult to do. You have to consider things like how frequently is the player eating? How long are they spending in the animation of eating? How gross is that animation? Using food as a catalyst for storytelling or to make the player more engaged like in Final Fantasy is good, but frequently forcing awkward or disgusting food like in the forest can be bad. Food is not necessary to make a realistic or even a believable game environment. Like, would I have even cared if in the 3 broomsticks or any of the Harry Potter areas, if they were just drinking beer instead of eating the same plate of food? Probably not. I probably wouldn't even notice. Even taking care to put food where you'd expect it will oftentimes lead the player to overlook the food if it's not essential to the game, like in Half-Life Alyx or in Counter-Strike. If the food doesn't play a role in the game, it's easily overlooked. The lore in a video game can be a factor in what food is present in the game, such as no fresh food in the wasteland of Tarkov. That makes sense, but it can also be a bit of a cop-out, like saying Cyberpunk doesn't have a deep amount of food choices because one company controls the food production. Art style limits what you can do with food in your game and how you present it, which is so obvious, but at the same time, it makes me feel good to know, yeah, that's true. Arctic Eggs, Minecraft, RuneScape, all of these would look really weird if they somehow left their traditional art style for something photoreal. And finally, there's probably a lot of more beneficial ways that you can bring realism into your environment without spending a lot of time on food, because everyone knows what food should look like, but I'm not an HVAC master. Like, I don't know what an HVAC system should look like. And I'm pretty sure some of these buildings in Cyberpunk are not normal, and that's not what HVAC should look like. But again, I don't know. So it's much easier to get away with lying about stuff like that than it is about lying about food. So who has the best food in gaming? You can make a lot of cases for this, and I think that it's going to be impossible to choose just one. I think Red Dead does it all incredibly well, and the details are unlike any other game. I think Monster Hunter and Final Fantasy have the best looking, visually appealing food. Monster Hunter more cartoony, Final Fantasy more realistic, but undeniably delicious. And then I think Minecraft and RuneScape use food the best in the overall gameplay loop, and it's the most true to how food is in the real world. So I don't know. Who do you guys think has the best food in games?